Good day, everyone. This is John Scarborough. We're back on the sawmill again. It's been a little bit since I've made a sawmill video. We're out here. We've got some oak cut up, some white oak. We're going to use this for our chicken tractor. I wanted to talk a little bit about waste on your logs, whether or not it's efficient or even something you should consider on cutting up your waste and trying to use it. I think this is a very good example for waste because this log, it really spread out a lot at the end of the log, and so there ended up being quite a bit of waste, more waste than I usually get. I've got about 4.5 inches there on the end, and then it goes all the way down to nothing. And then on this other one, it's probably about 4 inches, and then it goes down to nothing. And there's a lot of waste, and you can tell I had more waste over there across the side. And then of course there's a lot of pieces like this one right here that are more obvious, like, okay, I know that I can get some good out of there. So it's more obvious. And then there's another piece laying up underneath there. You can tell it's got a big broad end out there. And a lot of those kind of pieces is fairly obvious. I mean, they're cut down to a dimension. Those are 1 inches. So they're fairly easy to store, and then you can just decide later whether or not it's worth using or not. But it's pieces like this one, like these two right here, that it's like, okay, well, is it worth using? Is it not? It's not dimensional at the moment. I know that I can't store it unless I get it down to a dimensional size. And then once I get it cut up, we know this was a 9-foot log, okay? So we know that it's not going to be the 9 foot that the rest of these are. So it's like, well, is it worth cutting up and getting some of them? You'll get some, I would imagine you'd get some that would be maybe 7 foot, and then you might get one more that would be 3 foot, and then another one, if you really wanted to keep going, you might get one that's maybe 1 foot. Well, it's fairly obvious to me to throw the 1 foot ones away, and things like that. But the less obvious is, what do you do if you have some pretty decent boards that are 7 foot and then maybe even 3 foot? Is it worth the effort? Well, for me, it depends, And so if I've got a lot of wood, and right now I have a lot of wood laying around. I got stacks and stacks of wood. We had a big storm come through earlier this year, so I've got a lot of wood laying around, and it makes sense. Of course, I've got a mess out here right now, guys, but it makes sense for me to think more like, okay, if I take a lot of time to try to get every ounce of scrap, for me, it's probably not going to be worth trying to get those last pieces. That's one reason why it'd be nice to have some sort of wood stove or something like that to help some of your waste to be put to use. Figure out how you can put some of your waste to use, because regardless of what you do, you're going to end up with a lot of waste. You're going to end up with a lot of stuff that's going to get thrown away. So if you can find some way to utilize that, that would be very beneficial. But there are cases that I will use some of this, and for some people I would say if you didn't have a lot of wood, it might be more worth the effort. You're only going to end up with maybe 4 pieces that are usable there, and they're all going to be different sizes, and none of them will be the same sizes as your dimensional lumber. So they'll have to have its own stack. So is it worth using? Is it not? It's like if you don't have a lot of wood, then yeah, it can be worth using. You will get some usable lumber for sure. So I would definitely consider, going through the extra effort there. But, a lot of it just comes down to you have to kind of figure out for yourself what's going to be the best thing for you. Like it's a time management kind of thing. Like if you got a lot of time, you got the time to get the extra lumber, but you're not getting a lot of lumber. Or let's say it's a nice type of wood like this. Let's say that you don't get very much white oak. I get way more pine than I do white oak, okay? I get some white oak, but I don't actually get a huge amount of it. So I'm more likely to get my waste, to save some of my waste out of my white oak. But even still, this is still some wood that I probably would end up just going ahead and throwing away. Just because I still got enough that it's going to be hard to manage just right. You've got to get it stacked just right. All of that's got to be right, or it's a waste of time. It might look good now when you get done, but if you get it stacked and it's not weighed down right or anything like that, you may get twisted wood and all like that. Plus the extra effort you went through to deal with those couple of pieces, It takes effort to get a stack together. Like if you're getting a stack together for 9-foot lumber, there's a certain amount of effort, beginning effort, that goes into preparing that stack. Like, okay, I know it's got to be 9 foot long, so I got to get something ready for that. And then you decide, okay, how wide do I want it to be? Do I want it to be 3, 4, 5 feet wide? Like, how wide do I want that to be? Once you figure that out, you know, there's just different things involved with getting your stack done. A certain amount of time investment. So once you've gotten those things in place, it's not so hard to continue to get more and more 9 foot lumber. But then all of a sudden you throw in some 5 foot lumber, some 4 foot, you know, 3 foot, whatever. That really can start to add in some time. For me, I'm going to give you a little scenario, an extra scenario. I'm actually building a chicken tractor here on the farm. And so what I'll do sometimes is, if I know that I have a use for these coming up, like I know that I'm going to have some 3 foot by like 1/2 inch strips, like maybe up to 1 inch strips. Probably just do 1 inch. So 3 foot by 1 inch strips. I know that I'll be able to use this lumber right here in that chicken tractor. Okay. And I also know that for those chicken tractors, those things are in the rain all the time. They don't actually have to be as dry as a lot of other wood does. And I also know that it's hot summer right now. Wood is actually drying out a little bit faster in our area right at the moment. See, a lot of people in the summertime, they actually are more humid than they are in the wintertime. Here where I live in Louisiana, we actually get higher humidity in the wintertime, and it's a little bit more dry. Still as humid as all get out, but a little bit drier in the summertime. But especially this year with this drought. So I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm going to cut up some pieces. They're only going to be a few pieces. And what I'll do with these is I'll actually just stack them to the side in the shop somewhere, and I'll just let them dry for just maybe a month. And then I'll use them on that chicken tractor. So there's certain places that I know that I can use wood that's not, it's not green, okay? This log's been dead for a little while, not too long, you know, but also it will sit and dry at that 1 inch stage for a month or so in very hot and dry conditions. It's not going to be completely dry, it'll still be wet, but it's dry enough for the bracing that we'll use on it. So in this scenario, I think it's worth doing, but the main thing to think about when you're dealing with this kind of scrap is, you know, is there something else that I can do with the wood? Can I use this for firewood instead, you know, of going through the extra effort? The next thing is, can I easily get more of this wood? So like if this was pine, I've got a ton of pine right now, and I've got more pine that I can go get, you know. So it's not worth it for me at all to, you know, I'm going to throw out more pine than I will any other type of wood, you know. If this was cedar, I would probably get every ounce that I could get out of the cedar, you know, because I just don't get very much cedar at all. In fact, the only cedar I'm getting right now is the cedar, like this is cedar laying over here. The only cedar I'm getting right now is cedar that I can, when I make a trade to somebody else. So I'll cut somebody else's cedar up, and then I'll get to keep some of it, and then I'll give them cedar. That's the only way I'm getting cedar right now. Here in Louisiana, there's a lot of places around here that you just don't get good heart cedar. So there are some places that you do, but it's not as common as like over there in Texas where I grew up. It was a lot more common to see some really good cedar out there, and especially in South Texas. But I grew up in East Texas, and even over there was some good cedar. So the point is that the wood that is you're less likely to get, yeah, you're probably going to go ahead and spend it. You know, spend the time and get more lumber. But you really got to give it some thought, and just the main thing is realize that when you start cutting up these smaller pieces, and if it's not the full 9 foot, or if it's not the length of your stack, that's when it's going to be become aggravating. If you have other stacks that are different sizes, like I've got 9 foot stacks, 8 foot stacks, and 10 foot stacks right now. If you've got different size stacks and it will fit into those other stacks, sure, go ahead. You know, it's not that big of a deal if you've already got the stack invested. So anyway, guys, just want to kind of touch on that a little bit. Some of my own little things that I'm learning here and there. My goal for this is to go ahead and extend this mill. I actually got the material. I'm going to get this mill extended, and I'm kind of starting to figure out what I want. I know for sure that I want my sawdust blowing out, I feel like, but I've kind of got it sitting just a little bit different then I intend to sit it forever, just because I wanted to get an idea of how I wanted it to be. So like a lot of people mentioned here that I got my I got my log bunks on backwards compared to my saw head, and I actually did that on purpose. I know that ideally the blade needs to be pushing into your saw bunks and right into these stops right here, but I actually did that because I needed something. I can only load lumber ideally from this side, so I wanted to make sure I had something to roll my logs onto, and it still works just fine. You have to clamp it down each time when you do it that way, but it still works just fine like that. But I wanted to try that out for a while. I also wanted to try out my sawdust going that way, and I just didn't know for sure exactly how I wanted to do it. But I think I about got figured out what I want to do. I think I'm going to leave my sawdust going that way. I'm going to raise the sawmill up. I'm going to extend the sawmill. And then, of course, I'll turn the bunks around now that I kind of know what I want to do. And then I think I'm actually going to just weld some other stops on the other side. And that way I can use these for my clamp, to clamp the wood against, but then have some stops on this side as well, just for rolling logs off. That way I can come in from either way, and that won't really be a problem. But anyway, just kind of wanted to throw that out there a little bit. That's kind of my plans with the mill. Y'all watch out for those new videos, and as always, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know if y'all have any ideas for future videos.